All right. Walter, how are we doing getting everybody the permission for recording? You're muted, Walter.
Yeah, I think we've got everybody. Let me...
Let's give everybody a good 30 seconds or so to make sure they're set up to get everything done. I'm spotlighted now. Cool. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get rolling.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry.
Wednesday, November 18th, 4 o'clock press conference to go over the audit and election result totals so far. My name is Gabriel Sterling. I'm the voting system implementation manager for the state of Georgia. So as we stand right now, we have crossed the 5 million threshold of hand tallying done by the counties. We are down to 21 counties that still remain, quote unquote, in progress, which means they're inputting data and doing their QC process. Now, that does not preclude the fact that some people have hit complete on their tallying inside the Arlo system, but are still trying to track down those last couple of votes to make sure, because they want to get it perfectly right too. And inside the 21 counties that I was just saying are still, quote unquote, operationally in progress, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that have single digits. And like Baldwin County is spot on, 0 deviations. So, but they're still in progress. So it's got to go and click the button. So we're still in good shape on getting to what our intention was, which was to meet the midnight tonight deadline. Now, obviously, in that bucket of 21 counties, there are some of our biggest counties, the Fulton, the DeKalbs, the Gwinnett, Cobb, Chathams are in there. And Gwinnett, I know, is really diligently trying to get their data entry done, because we cannot do the full quality control process until all the data entry is in there. So as I said earlier, we will likely be having to use every minute of that midnight deadline. And we are encouraging the counties to work through to get that done. Now, but even when they're done at midnight, we still have to get all the stuff into our system, QC it from our end as a standalone to get the reports ready so we can get it out to you in a way that is digestible by everybody to see the outcomes. And like I said, our intention is to take all the tally sheets and everything else and put them up on a website so everybody can look at them. They can see the timestamps inside the Arlo systems. All that's going to take a little bit of time, but I think by noon tomorrow is our goal to have the information, the audit report out to everyone. In the meantime, the other counties where we found those 4 counties where we found the additional votes that had not been part of the original tally, their counties need to come together, their elections boards, to recertify those so they can be part of the state certification. It has to be done by Friday so that we can meet our goal of getting the military overseas UACAPA ballots out by the Saturday, the 21st deadline. So we feel confident what's happening right now. We haven't found no other new memory cards, or nobody's forgotten anything that we've seen yet. Doesn't mean it can't happen between now and midnight tonight. But Douglas County was the last one we saw. Let's see. So with that, I will go ahead and open it up for any questions you might have. But before I do that real quick, I do know that my friend Chairman David Schaefer is still talking about the discrepancy that was found during the audit. And again, audits find discrepancies and you correct discrepancies. And yes, Mark, the gentleman who found it, I served on credentials committees with him. He's a good guy, and he probably saved us some extra work and chasing our tails for a minute to figure out where those numbers were. So we are thankful that the monitors were there to find that, and we will make it part of the audit at the end, obviously. It will even us out to get to a very close number in all these counties. But again, the largest counties, you're going to see the biggest likelihood for having issues that you're not going to necessarily be resolved by midnight tonight. Just because there's more people, more tally sheets, and more things to track down. Smaller counties, it's easier because you have less buckets to look at. I mean, and literally some of these, they are buckets where they're sealed with numbers on them, and you're trying to track those down. So with that, I'll open it for any questions you might have. So Walter, who's got their hand raised first for us today?
David Wickard.
Okay, David.
Hi. Is there a process that needs to change going forward to make sure that the memory cards are loaded and not overlooked in the future?
The process is in place. We need to make sure the training is done so they follow it. There are several ways that they can do their reconciliations. They can base it on credit for voting. They can also look inside their election management systems where they have created a tabulator which would account for every single card on there. Now, under the old GEM system, as I said earlier today, there is an obnoxious visual representation that if you don't have a memory card accounted for, it's red. And if it is accounted for, it's green. Here, it's just a series of checkboxes. So there can be an empty checkbox, which is not as obnoxious, obviously. They should have gone through that. 4 counties obviously made, well, 3 counties made a mistake on that front. There was no tabulator created for the Floyd County situation because those ballots had not been scanned as they were intended to be. So again, it was 3 counties out of 159. Not perfect. Also the first time using this system in a large election, but we will obviously focus on that. And as I said earlier, it's on page 204 of the Election Management System manual. And we will obviously at the next GAVREO conference, which is the Georgia Association of Voting and Elections Officials and Registrars or something like that. That's their organization. We will go over that and focus on that intensely because before we had no paper, so reconciliation wasn't really much of a thing. Now we have paper. So we have paper, we have credit for voting, and we have the EMS system, all of which needs to match up so that we can be sure that every vote has been caught and put into the final results. So yeah, we are definitely going to focus on that moving forward.
Fair to say, sir, that if it had not been for the audit, that these votes, and these several thousand votes would not have been tallied?
Well, the thing is, on this particular one, there was a likelihood of a recount either way, and the recount, since the ballots were there for the audit, would have caught this as well. So that's 2 different ways they should have done it. And in this particular case, the audit caught it before the recount would have. But in the future, it is something we're going to really hammer home, and it'll be a state election board rule violation if you don't do your reconciliations properly. Who we got next, Walter?
Alexa.
Hey, Alexa.
Kind of a logistical question.
Okay.
Should we be staying up until midnight for results or like a press conference? What guidance do you have on what you want?
Here's my best suggestion. Drink some water, have some cocoa, go to bed, wake up refreshed because it'll be, the next 2 days we'll be going over data and explaining things. I said we will probably doing a report out. I think we're targeting noon right now. It could be earlier, it could be later. But right now, noon is kind of a general target we have to get the final reports out for the audit. And I think that will be sort of the news breaking thing at that point. And if we do the 11 o'clock press conference, maybe we'll just roll right into rolling that report out, or maybe we'll have it ready at 11. I just don't want to, we're running our audit teams into the ground right now. So I want to be fair to them and fair to our election staff and all those 159 elections directors so that they're not all running to the ground either. So the plan is to target the noon. I would go to bed at a regular hour tonight and then be ready to jump on it first thing tomorrow and see if anything has changed in the meantime. Okay. Does that help?
Yeah. A quick follow-up question. Because earlier you gave us, 4.96 or 7 million ballots have been kind of manually looked at. Is it safe to say now that all of them have, or virtually all of them have been manually reviewed?
I think virtually all of them have, and some of them have been looked at twice and counted twice, which our quality control process is going through and saying, you did this batch twice. So yes, every ballot at this point, barring something strange, has been looked at by an audit team in all 159 counties. That's a safe assumption. Barring something somewhere where when they're going through the quality control, they will find that they didn't do that. And I want to give an example of what that looks like. On day 1 of the audit, Worth County was done, and they were off by 384. Now, they went back and looked at their ballot manifest and saw, oh, there's 2 batches that when we add those together, they are exactly 384. So they went back, found those, hand counted them the way they're supposed to, hand tallied them, and then put them into the balance. And now Worth County is at straight up 0 where everything balances. So the quality control is an important part of that. And there's sometimes you'll see where they have more ballots than they were supposed to have. And that means you counted a batch twice. So you got to kind of work your way back through that. In smaller counties, it's faster and easier to do that because you have less literal buckets to look at. In larger counties, it takes a little bit more time.
So the larger counties are just doing like final checks at this point.
Some of them are still putting data entry in, and we can't know exactly where the QC process can start until the final data entry is done. I know Gwinnett is doing some data entry. I know Doherty is doing some data entry, although they had a big upload about an hour ago, and they are getting very close to being done. I think Cobb County is still doing some final stuff. Like I said, inside the 21, there's about 15 that are doing actual, real, moving data around, trying to make sure it all lines up to get to that point of doing the quality control processes.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next is Archith.
Archith, you right? He says you're still muted. Did you give him the unmute thing? Hey, Archith, I can give you a countdown of 3, 2, 1. There you go. You're in.
Hear me okay now?
Yeah. Archith?
Okay, sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute. Hey, Gabe, real quick, the question is, can you just give us the breakdowns of what's left? You mentioned some of the bigger counties. I don't know if you have all the numbers, but just in terms of, could this go past
this is going to be a moving target.
If there are counties issues, what happens?
It's a moving target because some of the people who are complete are still going through and trying to find those last little votes that are bugging them, but they're essentially complete. So I can read off the list of these that are still, and like I said, some of these, like Baldwin County, is literally a 0. I think all they have to do is hit the button, but I will read the list of the ones that we have officially in the Arlo process that are still open and going right now, which is Paulding, DeKalb, these aren't in any particular order, by the way, Floyd, Douglas, Chatham, Spalding, Baldwin, Dodge, Harris, McIntosh, Lincoln, Dade, Forsyth, Liberty, Gwinnett, Clayton, Hall, Peach, Stevens, Cobb, and last but not least, Fulton. So those are the ones we have that are still officially in there. Like I said, 5 of them are within single digits. So I think they just haven't hit the, we're complete button yet because they might be trying to track down that last little bit. Baldwin is at a 0. Maybe they went to lunch and forgot to hit the button. I don't know, but they are at 0 as well. So those are the ones we still have officially out, and the audit teams are working with them to make sure that they're going through the quality control processes so that we make sure we have all the ballots accounted for properly so we can get to a good final audit result. Who's next, Walter?
Okay, and we'll make a quick follow-up.
Sure.
We just saw.
Go ahead.
We saw something on Twitter, and I call and check with you guys, but when these results do come in, they will come in through your office, right? Because there's been some rumors saying all are counted, all are done. Just give us that sort of explanation of how everybody will know.
I'm having a hard time understanding your questions. I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you kind of speak up a little bit more? I'm going to turn up my microphone a little. Speaker. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we said real quick, there was an update on Twitter saying all the counties have been processed. Obviously, that's not true.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
When will? Okay.
Archith, we're not hearing you. I don't know what's going on.
Gabe, I think he's talking about a tweet that went out about an hour or two.
Yeah, I saw that, but I mean, that's not, I don't believe that's correct. So I don't know where that came from. Once we have the, like I said, the main thing is you'll be getting the full reports tomorrow around noon. That's sort of our intention right now. Who's next?
Stanley Dunlap.
Stanley?
You have to unmute on your end too, Stanley.
He looks like he's unmuted to me.
Okay.
Stanley? Your microphone working?
All right, we'll come back. Mill Moffitt.
There. Emil, you good?
I'm good now.
There we go.
Good afternoon. You mentioned those 4 counties that needed to recertify. What's the standard for needing to recertify, and how many counties do you expect will have to do that?
Just those 4, as far as I know, because nobody's changed their otherwise vote totals that they had already sent in to certify. So,
okay,
the county board has to come in and they have to vote to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Who's next?
Stanley. Okay, must have gotten some water. Nick Wooten.
Hey, Gabe, Nick Wooten from McClatchy. Just had a question for you. So the next couple of days, it's going to be extremely busy for y'all. Y'all have till Friday to certify the election results.
The understatement.
Yeah, can you sort of get into the weeds with us and explain what the next couple of days are going to look like for your office as you guys work to certify those results?
Well, there's going to be some dual track things happening with our staff and dealing with both the audit teams and consultants we brought in, as well as the regular election processes of certification. So the audit has to be completed and we'll accept it. And this is not something we've done before. So I don't know if we have to do a formal, we have accepted this from the secretary. That's more of a legal question. But then we move to the final certifications, which we have to look at all the results and make sure it lines up and everything makes logical sense. And they've said, yes, we are done. We agreed, yes, you were done. And then we will do the final certification from the secretary. And it's going to require some legwork and really a lot of sitting in front of computers and potentially making phone calls to make sure we're seeing everything properly and that everything is done right. And that's both on the audit side and on the certification side, because we got to get the audit done and put to bed before we can move officially to the certification mode. And then there is an anticipation, there's a possibility that we could, within 4 to 8 hours of certification, expect to get a notification from the Trump campaign to potentially do a recount and start lining up to get that done as well. So we've already talked to Dominion to make sure that we have enough scanners around. We have what we are the ones that are state controlled, which we'll send to the larger counties to deal with trying to take care of some of these issues. We'll probably send extras to Gwinnett since they have 2-page ballots they have to rescan. So there's many things we're going to have to do to get through this. And it's really just a lot of logistics, but we feel like we have enough of a timeline to get through it to make everything else. Because in the meantime, while we're doing this, we're finishing all the ballot building. And ballot building is a process where Dominion and our Center for Elections works to basically build a ballot. And when you do that, it's not just putting names on a thing with a check mark by it. You have to make sure you have the right ballot combo attached to the right people, which goes to the right voters, and make sure all of these reporting lines are correct. And everybody has to sign off on it at the state level and at the county level. And then we got to send it to printers for the ones that will be going to directly to counties when they're fulfilling the absentee ballots. It goes into the Dominion systems on the ICX, which is the touch screens, and then also into the scanners as well. So, and then in this particular case, we are still going to be doing the rollover list, which is those people who are 65 or over or disabled who requested a ballot for the entire election cycle. So that'll be going to our vendor, Runbeck in Arizona, with all of those ballot styles. And then we send the rollover list, which we've been working to, clean up and get tight, over to them. It's 500,000 plus, I think maybe 550. I'm not sure what the number is right now. We'll try to get that to you in the morning. So those can be prepared to go out in the next week to week and a half. And they have a quality control process on their end to make sure the right ballot gets to the right voters. And in the meantime, we are still receiving, I think we're at 100 or over 150,000 new requests that have come in through the portal and potentially into the ENET system through paper requests at the county levels. So we're doing all this at the same time. And don't forget, in the middle of this, we're still doing a special election in Congressional District 5 to finish up the term for John Lewis. So Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton are doing regular election duties while doing all this. And that election will continue to still be on December 1st. And that includes the State Senate Special for 39, the Western District DA over in Athens and Oconee, and I think a couple of other ones. But we have there's a lot of moving parts, and our teams and the county teams will remain very busy for the next 48 hours.
Right. Has there been any communication from the Trump team, the campaign, or the Georgia Republican Party about asking for this recount? Have they preemptively asked? I know that Collins made the request earlier.
They have not made any official ask. No one's, I was texting with David Schaefer earlier. We were talking about the situation in DeKalb. There was nothing specific there. I'm not aware. I mean, we're making an assumption that it may be asked for. I'm hoping that the hand audit will show that the machines counted correctly, and in fact that they plussed his number up by 1,375 through this audit process. And again, I'm hoping that we won't have to put the counties through that level of work. But if that request comes through, it is a lawful request. It is an understandable request on some levels, and we will work with the counties to fulfill that request if it comes through. Okay,
last one, just real quick. Virtually all 5 million of these ballots have been looked at, and 21 counties are still going through some sort of data checking process. Do I understand that correctly?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It's probably less than 21 because there's like 5 that have single digits. I just think they haven't hit the button to say they're done yet. So it's probably closer to 16 or so.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabe. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Quinn Scranlon.
Hey, Gabe.
Quinn.
A quick rapid fire again for you. Just want to be sure I understood correctly. I thought that the deadline to request a recount was 2 business days, so that wouldn't include Saturday and Sunday. Is that inaccurate? Is it 48 hours?
You know what? I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to ask legal counsel on that one. It never occurred to me because we didn't think we'd be going on a weekend to get to that point for certification. So it could be if it is 2 business days, but I'll have to follow up with Ryan Germany, our general counsel, to let you know that one. So good question.
Okay.
Well, take a note of that and go ahead and shoot a text over to Ryan if you would. Maybe I could do that before the call's over.
Okay, great. And then you said the county boards have to, be called in to recertify the results in the 4 counties. Do you know if all of them have agreed to do that?
As my understanding is, everybody's kind of lined up. Some of them might have already done it this afternoon. I think one of them coming in tomorrow morning at 8. So I think they're all lined up. I've not heard of any issues surrounding that particular.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, will we get to see the secretary certify the results? And I understand he's probably still in quarantine right now. And then additionally, I know the governor has to sign something within, 24 hours by 5 p.m. Saturday. Is there any expectation that the governor will sign his piece of this at the same time as the secretary? Do you guys know anything about that?
No, I have no idea. I mean, we have to sign it. We transmit it to them, and their schedule is up to the governor and his staff as to how they're going to do that. They have been asking us when we plan on certifying, and we're trying to say, we're still aiming to get certified by Friday. So that's where we stand on that one. But they get to decide when they're going to do that. We haven't done some kind of ministerial way of, handing the papers over and he signs in front of a camera. We've not had any kind of discussion like that.
Okay, so we won't see the secretary sign anything either?
He's still in quarantine right now, so okay. I couldn't say.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Next, we have Bo Evans.
Hey, Bo.
Hey, Gabe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Can you quickly go over for the 4 counties that had some of the counting issues, Floyd, Fayette, et cetera? Can we go over the numbers on those really quickly? The super quick, the changes in the ballots that were located, as well as the margin changes.
Let me do the big buckets first, which are basically the margin changes. So out of the gate, we had Floyd was 778 towards President Trump. Fayette was 449 towards President Trump. Walton was 176 towards President Trump. And Douglas was 28 back towards Biden. So those are the margin changes. Now, I have a crazy sheet of just notes up here all over the place. So we track everything down. In Fayette, it was 2,755 total votes that was found on that one early vote card. So there were 1,577 of those for President Trump, 1,128 for former Vice President Biden, 43 for Jorgensen, and 7 write-ins. In Douglas, which was Lutheran 739 Election Day precinct, it was 128 for Trump, 156 for Biden, and 7 for Jorgensen, and 2 undervotes. In Floyd, it was 1,643 for the president, 865 for Biden, and 16 for Jorgensen. And Walton, I don't have a Jorgensen number. All I have is the margin between the president and the former vice president. It was 225 for Trump and 49 for Biden. And I gave you Douglas earlier. So those are the 4 counties, and I think I got all the numbers in there as best I have them.
Gabe.
Yeah. All right. Who's next?
Kate Brumbeck. Please unmute. There you go.
Oh, no. There you are.
Okay. I got an email from the DeKalb Board of Elections, and they said they plan to hold a special meeting tomorrow to consider recertification of their election results. Do you know what that's about?
Not a clue.
Okay.
I've heard of nothing along those lines, and their numbers are coming in relatively tight. So I don't know if they need to recertify, if there's a misunderstanding on that, because we've found no new votes that I'm aware of over there that would require recertification.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I haven't been told yet. I mean, these things are moving targets right now.
Next is Ann Walker.
Hi, Gabe. Could you confirm these comments from The Hill? They got exclusive interview with Raffensperger, who said that the top election official in Georgia raged at what he described as politicians giving false hope and ginning up anger over unsubstantiated allegations of systematic voter fraud, calling it, quote unquote, emotional abuse to mislead voters into thinking that the election was stolen from President Trump. Can you confirm these comments?
I I don't know if I would consider Brad Raffensperger raging as for that characterization, but I do know that he gave the interview at The Hill. I know that's been out there, and I've not heard anybody say it's not correct. So my assumption is those are correct, and those are his words.
Got it. And also, the margin that we had once election night was over was 4,056. I think you've been operating off of 14,156.
Right.
What's the margin that you've been operating off of?
I started at the 14,156, and I've moved it down by taking those additions for those 4 counties and gotten it to 12,781.
Because I think the number that everyone had was 14,056. So was there another 100 votes that were added to the margin at some point after election night?
I don't know. I just did that in that math myself, and I could be off by 100. But those are the numbers that I had based on that. I can go through and rework them before we get back together again. But I've been saying that now for 3 days, so I assume nobody said anything different, so it was right. So either way, if I'm off by 100, then it's off by 100. But I don't think that I am. I think I actually put in a calculator. I didn't use my own brain for that one.
We've got
and lastly,
go ahead.
Do you mind if I ask one more about between now and the certification of the results? Gabe, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Am I breaking up? Okay. So how many teams are we talking about who are going to be sitting in front of computers basically doing the final checks before it's handed off to the Secretary of State and the governor?
Well, when you say teams, I mean, there's going to be people at the county level finishing up, and then the state and our audit consultants we brought in from Voting Works will all be crouched over computers, probably looking cross-eyed at that point. It'll be, in the 30s or 40s, I'm guessing, at some point for some of that. Our teams are smaller than that. I just think they've also brought in extra people to help out. And I don't know how many they have right now because, like the secretary, I'm in COVID quarantine. So I just get on conference calls and have people yelling at the phone. So I don't know how many people are actually in the room. But I know it's a lot of people doing a lot of hard work with a lot of long hours who are, fighting sleep fatigue and operating on coffee and chocolate right now. Trying to
So once the teams say, okay, the numbers look good, what happens then?
We will put together a final report that we will probably release and have a statement at the same time from the secretary, kind of explaining that this is the audit result. Our anticipation is it will show that the result is correct. And then we will be working on getting up that website that has all of the backup information, all the tally sheets, all of the Arlo log files showing when things were put in and when they were changed, so everybody can keep a track and take a look at that thing. And I don't know how quickly that can be done, but we're trying to get it done as fast as we can, working with our IT team.
And we would expect Raffensperger to sign it pretty quickly once everyone's done with the final checks.
Well, we got to do the audit first. I don't know that he signs it. I think he just kind of accepts the audit, says, yes, this is the audit. I don't know the legal maneuver on that because we never had one of these before. Then you move from there to the certification. The certification is something he would specifically have to sign, but we can't certify until all those other 4 counties recertify. And I think that'll all be done before noon tomorrow, but I don't know that for certain.
Is there anything formal? Will we see pictures of Raffensperger signing the final certification?
Again, as of right now, he is still in COVID quarantine, so I don't know how we logistically handle that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now next is Benton with Nexstar.
Hi, I'm Brian Enton with WGN America. Gabe, what is your response to President Trump's claims that there are thousands of fraudulent votes in Georgia?
That he's been misinformed on that front, and the reason for the audit is to make sure that every legal vote is counted.
And can you explain the difference between the audit and a formal recount, if that does happen?
The audit is under our new law that was passed 2019. It's a pre-certification audit. We chose to do a risk-limiting audit. We chose a risk-limiting audit of the presidential race with a zero risk limit, which means that we have to physically hand tally every ballot. So in that case, this is prior to certification. There's a different set of rules around that. And the people are going through, literally looking at each one, putting it on the tally sheet, and then those are added up at the end. You do your quality control. You get your audit report out where you say, here's our counts. The margins changes are minor on this thing. Like I said, there's going to be differences on the final count out of this. Not just from those 4 counties where we got, the big buckets that were just flat out missed by those county administrators, but there'll be 1 off here, 12 off there, 3 off there, and it's going to go back and forth. So the final numbers will look very similar to where we're at least that's the hope. And that is step 1. That is the pre-certification audit. So once that's done, move certification, and then the likelihood is the president will remain in second place, and his team could ask for a recount. Now, a recount is done in a very specific, different way. And I apologize. I know some of you all have heard this before, but this is for everybody who hasn't. We have procured high-capacity scanners that are deployed in every single county. That was done months ago when we originally negotiated a very good price for the system on the front end. And we made the decision, originally only 14 counties were going to have the high-capacity scanners, the large counties, to handle their absentee loads. So we ended up getting one for every single county and getting multiples for the larger counties on just the occasion that potentially, given the demographics and potential political changes in the state, this might become necessary. So we already have deployed out high-speed, high-capacity scanners that are called ICCs. Now, with those in place, every county will create a test deck that will have, as I've said this example before, 50 votes for President Trump, 45 votes for Joe Biden, and 5 votes for Joe Jorgensen. You run those through the scanner, then you close out that particular election, you get the tape off, and it comes out the way you intend. You 50, 45, and 5. You say, okay, the scanner is scanning correctly. You clear those votes off, and then you go through the process of rescanning every single ballot in the county. And if there's a ballot that needs adjudication, it goes to the same adjudication board, following the same rules. We have one Republican, one Democrat, and one elections official to discern the intended vote of that voter. So, and that would happen in all 159 counties as fast as we can get it done. But the certification of the entire election is not stopped by that, because we still have to get the UACAPA ballots out the door for the senatorial runoffs and the PSC runoffs and the various smaller county runoffs that are happening on January 5th.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Michelle Lee.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Just to clarify, you've mentioned the 4 counties in which the margins have been changed. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that beyond the 21 counties you're waiting on, the rest of the counties were spot on, or were those the only 4 for which so far you know of any margin changes?
Spot on is such a relative term. Spot on for us in this point means 0 deviations. But if you're off by 1, I mean, you can essentially say you were spot on one way or the other. We have some that are so they're at 10. I'm looking at some of these, 22 out of 54,000. I mean, there's nothing that's really moving the ball around. And there's some that are negative on that front and some that are positive on that front. So we're going to work with all the counties to try to find these last little bits to try to tighten it up as much as we can. But again, we're looking to verify the results that the machine saw. And whenever you deal with human beings, human frailty comes into play, and we've been saying this for weeks. We guarantee the final number from this hand tallying will be different from the final number we saw coming after all the counties had put their final numbers into the EMS and into our election night reporting. That's just going to happen. Machines are always going to be more accurate at counting things than human beings are. It's just the way we're built. So we have to accept that that's going to be a little bit different. And it doesn't mean anything that there's been skullduggery or underhandedness. There's just human beings at that point. Now, if we're off by 5,000 on something, then we got an issue. But so far, we've found those issues and we've corrected them through the audit process. So the audit process is doing what it's supposed to do, which is find and correct those errors and allow us to get a good count of every legal vote in the state of Georgia.
Sure. So you're saying for the most part, the other counties, the deviations are not significant enough to change the margin one any noticeable way.
Yeah, I mean, because some counties are a little over, some counties a little under. It's just, again, human nature. I mean, hell, there could be somebody at a 0 ballot count difference, but they could be different inside the swing. There could be 2 votes for President Trump or 2 votes for Biden and 2 votes away from the other person based on the hand counting and based on the re-adjudication by itself. Because there were ballots that were adjudicated in this, which could come out to it because there's different people looking at it than did the first time. So we just anticipate this to be a little bit different no matter what happens. You're looking for the percentages of changes to assure that the machine count that we saw, that was what we saw online, is verifying that that's the actual count at the end of the day, and that's what we'll be certifying.
Got it. One last question. The question that was asked earlier about whether the recount request comes within 2 business days or 48 hours, the law says 2 business days, so I had been going by that. But if we can get clarification on that before the end of the call, that'd be really great.
My best guess is the law says 2 business days, so they probably have till Tuesday. Okay. But I will try to get. I'm hoping that somebody from our staff is texting Ryan Germany right now, so they can text me and tell me the answer, so that we can give you the answer.
Thank you.
David Clemens.
Hey, I know y'all have asked for the resignation in Floyd County. Have you carried that out to the other 3 counties where there have been these ballots that were missing?
Well, as I said, this is a very different situation. You had, in those, there was a way to catch the issue based on things they didn't do reconciliation properly. In Floyd County, there's 2 things that happened. One, August was a disaster there. They didn't have their emergency ballots in place. They didn't have their backup systems in place. So that was one thing. And then this happened where they had 2,700 ballots that they just flat out didn't scan. But for this process, we likely may not have been able to find those. And that is a huge problem. And it's very different than the situations we saw in the other ones where they missed a card and they just did the reconciliation process. There wasn't a reconciliation process that was going to catch this thing in Floyd County, which made it a lot more dangerous in terms of losing potential votes.
So what would you say to voters? Because I'm here in Walton County, where obviously some people are concerned. What would you say to voters here about, what they need to think about election security and having their votes counted going forward after discovering some votes got missed?
Well, the thing is, the process worked, and we were able to find those votes and get them into the mix. And that way that they should have better faith in the process that the human beings did their jobs at the end of the day. One of the things we're definitely going to focus on is, guys, you got to do your reconciliation before you finalize your vote totals. And like I said, this EMS is different from our last EMS, which was GEMS, which, as I pointed out before, had a very obnoxious, if you have all your cards, you get a green. If you're missing a card, you get a red. So it's really hard to miss. In this current one, it's a little more subdued. It's just a checkbox of not being there. So I don't know if they didn't look at it. I don't know if they didn't look at their check-in numbers, because there's multiple ways you can do reconciliation on this, and you want all of them to line up before you say, yes, I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Matt Johnson.
Hey, just wondering, are you any closer to figuring out a total cost for this? And if not, do you know when you might be at that total?
Not a clue. I've not focused on it at all right now. I've been trying to focus on a way to do some cost sharing based on our HAVA dollars, the Help America Vote Act. And also, we did take into account that when we merged the December election with the January election, that was going to free up resources for those counties they can use for this process and potentially for the recount process if that becomes necessary. But we will obviously start getting receipts in them. The biggest cost is going to be the labor cost, and that we know that. So we're trying to figure out how can we best deploy our dollars, especially to those counties that have specific resourcing issues, which are the smaller and medium-sized counties. We love all the counties equally, but there are some counties in more need than others.
Thank you.
Hmm?
Next is Stephen Rosenfeld.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for doing this. So one of the observers that I talked to who came in from Colorado, where he's had spent a lot of years watching them develop a risk limiting audit.
Yeah.
Said that he saw county officials taking time to reconcile their numbers before they entered them into Arlo. And that was of concern to him. So I was wondering, did you hear anything about that? His implication was, if you're doing that, you're not dealing with raw numbers. Well,
here's the thing. You can do the quality control process before or after. If they saw something that jumped out at them and said, hey, this isn't right, let's go back and make sure this is right before we put it into Arlo. I know what he's talking about. If you're doing a traditional risk limiting audit, you don't have to do the whole hand retally, which is a very different thing than the situation we're dealing with here. And talking to Voting Works, that is not unheard of to do that this way. And let's be fair, Colorado spent nearly a decade, I think about 8 years, perfecting their RLA process. We've done it in about a year, and we are pulling it full bore, doing a full hand retallying, which was not necessarily our guess when we started the process and chose this back last year, the RLA process. But again, we are listening to our consultants from Voting Works, and they feel comfortable and confident where they're at, because even when you put it in Arlo, you go in and you're still going to go back to that quality control check. Now in Arlo, you can then get the log trail of where they've changed and fixed things, but you will still have the tally sheets, which will show those potential changes. So I think that would hopefully meet the goal they're looking for. And the main goal we're looking for here is to say, this count was correct based on what we see through this audit, and you can have faith in the outcome from what the scanners scanned and what the EMS and election night reporting showed.
So one more quick question. This same fellow was talking to some of the county election supervisors about what machinery issues they were seeing. So I think it was Cobb County where they had to duplicate 5,000 ballots. And he said that that was because overvotes weren't being properly read by the scanners. Does that sound right to you?
No. They had chosen not to use the adjudication module because they didn't realize they had to have it near the EMS, and they did an off-site on that one. That's why they chose to do duplication that way. The main duplication we saw, there was tons of overvotes in the United States Senate race. So that's about the same percentage we were seeing in terms of overvotes because people were voting for every Republican and voting for every Democrat. So that doesn't seem out of line from what we saw. It's probably difficult for him because they are a mature mail-in voting state. This is the first time this state's really done things along these lines. So it's going to look a little bit different, I'm quite sure.
Sure. I guess the big question is, were there other like onboard mechanical or process things that you saw from the technology as opposed to the people? Not really. The only technology issue we saw was in Gwinnett County, where they set up multiple adjudication stations and they set up their Microsoft queue and they configured it wrong. And so they had the one adjudication server with 3 units that were serving to it. And it's supposed to, the Microsoft queue kind of doles out the ballots to be adjudicated. And since it was misconfigured, it just would dole out one and then stop, and you'd get spinning wheel of death. So that was the only real mechanical issue we saw with anything with this equipment. So the equipment operated very well. And if there was equipment issues, it was replaced really quickly, like I talked about in Floyd County on October 24th, when we saw that there was a log mismatch on those 2 memory cards. They that day switched out the scanner and got a new one in and took those ballots out. So there's never going to be a thing where every single piece of equipment works well, but by deploying, over 100,000 pieces of equipment and having a handful of things like that happen. But no, we saw no real issues with the equipment, either on the BMD side or the scanning side. There was some issues with the poll pads in Spalding and Morgan County, which we're still investigating. But outside of that, there wasn't anything really that happened that was a mechanical issue. And we can see the success of that by the average 2-minute wait time throughout the state on election day. Right. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mark Niquette.
Hi. Do you have an estimated time you expect to certify the statewide results on Friday, and how's that going to get released?
No, and we will probably do a press release.
You still expect the results to be certified on Friday, though, statewide?
It darn well better be, because we got to get UACAVA ballots out on Saturday. So, yes, we fully anticipate certifying the results on Friday.
Thank you.
David Wickert again.
Sure, you talked about the difference between the old system and the new system. The old system kind of obnoxious in your face, the new one more subdued. Does the new system need to be a little more obnoxious?
We've already talked about that with our guys. And frankly, there's responsibility on the elections directors to know what they need to do. And if we can make it easier for them, we'd like to do that. So I already had the discussion with the Dominion guys about potentially making it, again, more obnoxious, for lack of a better word. But it really comes down to training and knowing what you have to do. This reconciliation process has always been there, but now we have a lot more things to reconcile. And before, you just had the memory cards and that was it. There was no paper to reconcile. There wasn't all the logistical stuff around that. You had check-in data that would come in later, and you had ENET data for when you had the absentee in person, which is the early voting check-in, and the absentee regular mail ballots. This was a very bizarre year for our elections officials. In the history of the state, the most absentee ballots we'd ever had, I think, was 284,000, and that was in 2018, and that was like a blockbuster amount. To go from that to 1.3 million for a general election this year was totally new. To go to 2.6 million early votes in person, totally new. And to drop down to just 1 million on election day, totally new. And they were having to deal with a new election system, all new equipment in the middle of COVID. So, it was a lot to take in. And I think they executed pretty admirably, especially considering now we have the wherewithal to have these kind of reconciliations and have an audit of a paper trail, which our hope is having that paper trail will give every voter in Georgia the confidence that their vote was cast the right way, and that the machinery, once the audit's done, you'll see the machinery counted it the way they were voted. They go to a BMD, and 75% of them did. They went to a BMD, made their selections on the screen, printed the ballot, looked at the ballot, said, yes, those are my choices, and they dropped it into a scanner. And they saw, if they do what I want them to do, look at the little screen and saw the vote total go up by 1. So they could hear it drop in. I think there's something special about that versus what we used to have, which was a beep and the card gets pushed out at you and you're like, okay, I'm done. So it's a part of it is a ritual, but now we have a paper artifact that we can always go back to. And it's the voter's responsibility to look at that paper to make sure it's the right way. And we feel comfortable and confident that given the paces the system that's put through this year is going to serve us well for the next decade at least. Thanks, David. Who's next?
Alexa Course.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could give a couple examples of what preparing for the recount looks like, or preparing for a possible post-certification recount.
Well, the good part is all the ballots are already in really identifiable buckets because we had to build a ballot manifest for the audit. So they know that already. They will probably have to, roll out their ICC into an area that can be visible because you want to make sure there's a public viewing. Again, we will encourage people to live stream this. Somebody said of the hand tally I really enjoyed, it was the watching paint drive democracy. So it's a similar kind of thing here. They will build those ballots, the ballot deck we're talking about, and they can choose however they want to do it. They can mirror their results. They can choose not to. They could have, 80 of one, 10 of one, doesn't really matter, but, probably about 100 on the test deck. They run that through the ICC. They have, two people look at it and go, yes, this is correct. This is what we anticipated. Clear that off, and then begin the arduous process of rescanning every single ballot. For the majority of counties, they will have a single ICC running, and they'll probably start with the absentee ballots first because those will be the most likely to need adjudication because they are hand marked. We want to try to get that out of the way first. It was the same thing we do with the hand tally here. And then they will move on to the BMD ballots, and they will probably do absentee in person, and then they will probably go to the election day ballots. And you'll try to keep up with those buckets, and you'll see that the outcome will be essentially the same. Some of the adjudication might make it a little bit different, and there's just the possibility it could be off by one or two just because of the nature of scanning really quickly, where maybe two ballots got stuck together. You never know, but we're not going to potentially see large swings based on this because, like I said, the hand audit isn't showing that right now. So we can't anticipate having electronic counting be very far off from what we already had from what we were going to be certifying come Friday.
Thanks.
Can I talk with my hands any more than that?
Kate Brumback.
Real quick, I know you said you plan to release the audit report by noon, possibly earlier. Will there be any notification prior to that it's done, or will the audit report release sort of be effectively you guys telling us?
I think the audit release will be effectively us saying it's done.
Okay, thanks.
Miles O'Brien.
Hey, Gabe. I think maybe I didn't hear this correctly, but is it possible that the scanning process, given the choke point being the scanner, might actually take longer than what we just witnessed?
There is that possibility. I mean, Fulton County had 170 teams at one time going. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive. I'm not sure how many scanners they have deployed at Fulton right now. I just can't recall. I think it's more than 5, might be 6. And like I said, we have some state ones we're kind of distributing to the places that might need some extras. But there's every possibility that the larger counties could take longer than they did to do this process, yes.
So do you have any idea then how long a rescan recount will be?
It depends on the size of the batches they decide to run. I mean, you might think that doing a giant batch might be the safest way to go, but in terms of logistically handling it, you usually want to go with smaller batches and move them on through the process. And I think they'll start off a little slower to kind of get used to doing that much scanning. And then the BMD ones are the easy one. It's going to be the absentee ones that will be probably the more problematic ones because they will have to go to the adjudication modules if they're choosing to use those modules. And they have the hand marking on them, and they're just bigger. They're functionally larger for the most part. So I anticipate most of the counties will get done in a day, but the large counties could take some extra time. And if necessary, we have in the past taken, if a county finishes, we might take their ICC and move it over to another county to help out because at the end of the day, all of this is state-owned equipment. It's not county-owned equipment. So if we need to redeploy, we'll redeploy to get to the end game faster.
Okay, so if you get a request on Tuesday night, you get started Wednesday. Do you work through the holiday weekend, all that stuff?
God, I hope not. I mean, Thanksgiving's Thanksgiving. So, and we don't anticipate anything. Our plan is to get through as quickly as we can without killing the counties. At the end of the day, let's remember this. These are men and women. They've got kids. They've got lives. Their life is not dedicated to just being in the elections office. I think they've spent more time there than they intended to begin with. So we'll be logical. We'll work with the counties. We'll put together a scaled out time. We will put together the work hours similar to what we did for how many man hours it was going to take to do this hand audit. But we've been very focused on the hand audit right now to make sure that gets done. We will then turn our guns to the other side. We've already had a couple of discussions about what it's going to take to get through a recount. So I was hoping that we could avoid it. I doubt we can. So we're moving into the beginnings of the planning stages for how we're going to execute that to get it done as quickly and as accurately as we can.
All right. One final thought. Are there any circumstances, statutory authority, et cetera, that would allow the campaign, presumably the Trump campaign, of course, to ask for a hand recount? Or does it, by statute, have to be by scanner?
Right now, under state election board rule, this is the process that we follow. So that is the rule that holds. It would require the state election board to change that. So I do not imagine that anybody would necessarily want to do that because we just went through a hand tally of these things. But there's no statutory way to do that I'm aware of right now.
And the campaign doesn't pay for this, correct?
No, they do not.
Okay, thank you.
Although I think we may look at changing that in the future legislation.
That's all the questions.
Say again?
That's all the questions we got, Gabe. Did you see the text from Ryan?
Oh, hold on. I did not. Everybody wait. I got an answer. So there we go. Is it from Ryan to everybody or Ryan just to me?
Actually, it was from me to you.
2 business days. There we got an answer. So if we do it on Friday, they have Monday, Tuesday. So the end of the day, Tuesday, I guess, would be the 2 business days. So there's your answer for sort of clarification. I'm glad people listened to me when I was asking for that on this call. All right. Well, I appreciate it, everybody.
Gabe, it's Quinn. Really quick. It looks like Miles and LaCrae have questions. I just don't think Miles knew how to raise his hand, but I'm just trying to help them out.
Let's see. I just answered a bunch of Miles' questions. All right. Let's see.
I think I'm unmuted now. It's LaCrae.
Yeah.
Hi, Gabe. Thank you again for continuing to do this with a smile twice a day, every day. My question, I just want to
get off the call. It looks like water, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right. I just wanted to make sure, I know you said it a million times this week, but is it fair to put Douglas County and Floyd County in the same bucket in terms of they both had issues where ballots that weren't reported on election night were found during the audit and will now have to be added, right?
Now, Floyd is a fundamentally different thing because those were ballots that were never even scanned. And that's a very different thing from our point of view because there's less guardrails to catch that kind of a problem. You have the check-ins, which should have been a red flag, but the other ones, they didn't check their EMS and they didn't check their check-in. And that's a issue of reconciliation. I always forgot to forget the word reconciliation. So they're fundamentally different. And then the other thing on Floyd, they had a really big issue back in the August runoff where they had, again, some managerial decisions that were very poor and some training issues that caused additional problems for their voters. So this is a stack on a stack, kind of a strike one, strike two kind of thing. And it's unfortunate. I like Mr. Brady. He's a very nice guy. But this kind of managerial malfeasance doesn't do service to the voters, and it was continuous through both of those cycles. So, I think human beings are allowed to make mistakes. This audit caught them. Unfortunately, the magnitude of this mistake over there was ballots not even getting scanned. So there was not even in their EMS system a card to go check back to. So they had less guardrails in place to catch that. I'm glad that they stored those ballots. They follow the rules on that, but this was a fundamentally different thing than what happened in Douglas, Walton, and Fayette. And I think Miles had another question too, if that's potentially there. So we can find Miles and unmute him. Or did Miles drop off? Let's see. I apologize for everyone to see me scroll. Mike, I don't see Miles anymore, so maybe he dropped off. All right, well, if that's it, I appreciate everybody's time and your patience and doing a good job of getting the facts out because that's important. We feel good about where we stand right now. We feel comfortable with the direction of the audit. That doesn't mean there could be in the next 7 hours, there could be some issues. But I'm prayerful that we can get through this, and that we can find a way to have everybody at the end of the day, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, Socialist, whatever, have faith in the outcome of the election regardless of how it came out. In 2018, there was the one side of the aisle had no faith in the outcome of the election. In 2020, the other side of the aisle now has no faith in the election. So we've got to get to a point where people understand through our transparency, through our audits, through our processes, and through the hundreds and thousands of people in the state of Georgia who are elections workers and poll workers and the elections office here, and everybody who's involved in this, and even the parties. They need to have faith in the outcome of these elections, whether they win or whether they lose, because that's the bedrock of how we have a transfer of power and people feel like they're being governed appropriately. So with that, I say good night, and we will talk to you all tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have good news that we've completed the audit. It shows we're hoping it'll show that the outcomes were correct, and we can move on to the certification process. So thanks a lot, guys.